Good morning. It's 8:33. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Petersen at wakeupamerica.show.com. What time is it in London, though? It's time for us to head across the pond. Isn't it a miracle, this modern technology, what it can help us accomplish? Joining me now on camera is Sophia Worringer to talk about International Men's Day and why she says that it's actually a feminist holiday. Let's get her on camera right now. Good morning, Sophia from London. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Glad to have you here. So I read your article and I was fascinated by it. International Men's Day is a feminist cause. You wrote on 1828.org.uk. So make the case, Sophia. Why is International Men's Day a feminist holiday in your mind? Love to hear it.
Well, I think for many people, when they hear that title, they will roll their eyes and think, oh no, here we go again. This is the men trying to get back the position of dominance that they've enjoyed for centuries, and can't they just quiet down for one day and let us get on with it? But my argument that I want to put forward has a few layers. And I think one of the layers is we need to dial down this competition, this sometimes aggression between the sexes that says that if women are on the rise, then men need to be on the descent. And I think that's really important. And I think the second layer is also the fact that when men are successful, when men are thriving, when men are happy, women also benefit. And so caring about issues where they are falling behind is a way of promoting equality, yes, but is also a way of benefiting women too. And our lives and our happiness are so intertwined. We can't be promoting one at the expense of the other. And when men are falling behind, like we've seen, 84% of rough sleepers in the UK are men. These are all UK stats. I'm sure they'll be similar for America. 75% of suicides, 2/3 of alcohol-related deaths, all these issues which men are overrepresented in are very sad, very concerning. And because of this inequality, if feminists are proponents of equality, they should be taking up the cause where inequality lies, whoever is falling behind.
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Sophia Worringer. She is the head of research at State of the Nation for the Center of Social Justice. Just because it's social justice, though, don't freak out, Edie.
No, 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 no.
It's a
She's
center. Yeah,
I'm agreeing.
yes. Well, it's a center right think tank, so
Yeah.
it
Okay.
doesn't quite have the leftist
No, I
connotations
picked up on that.
in
That
the
well,
UK,
that I'm
perhaps, than it
not
does here
listening to some kind
in the
of
United States.
communist
No,
propaganda
you're
here.
not. Sophia Worringer is a
I
contributor to Young Voices in the
okay.
United Kingdom, and she's joining us here. You can send us a text if you'd like to ask a question. 573-319-1586 is the text line. Now, Sophia, it seems as if the advancement of women in, over previous generations has come at the expense of men, most specifically in academia. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, so girls have been outperforming in GCSEs, the standardized exams that our children take at age 16 since they were founded in 1988. Every year, girls have outperformed boys. And it's quite a significant percentage point gap. So in the last results set, it was 9%. Apart from in two subjects, they outperform boys across the board. And those two subjects are physics and statistics. And what's interesting is sometimes the glee with which this is reported. So a very eminent professor of education, Alan Smithers, commenting on the gap between the achievement in boys and girls, made the comment that maybe girls are just cleverer than boys. And I take issue with that generalization, because if that was reversed and people were going around saying maybe boys are inherently cleverer, maybe boys are inherently this or that, we would rightly take issue with that. And yet when it's said about girls at the expense of boys, there seems to be less of a problem. And I think also an interesting comment this professor made was the reason because of this gap he put down to was that during COVID pandemic, when lots of our schools were shut for long periods of time, he said, well, boys just went to play PlayStations and girls kept studying. Now that is a huge generalization and stereotype, but because it's directed at a group that is normally seen to be coming out on top, boys, men, it seemed to be okay. And I just take issue with those stereotypes, and I think we should be challenging them wherever they are found, not just when they're stereotyping minorities or people we deem to be at a disadvantage.
If you're just tuning in to the Wake Up America show, I'm speaking to Sophia Worringer. She is talking to us about a column that she wrote that said that International Men's Day is a feminist holiday. Now, when you say, stereotypes, and we try and break down this concept of stereotypes, Sophia, I might, push back and offer you a little bit of a challenge here. Some stereotypes exist for a reason. And, the idea that, men are cleverer than women or things like that, it's a bit of a trope. But what's fascinating to me is when you look at like sports, for example, and how like the transgender dynamic has, sparked a conversation about the actual differences between men and women. I mean, you must acknowledge that, in some sense, that there are important differences between men and women that give us strategic advantages in certain ways. Wouldn't you agree?
So I think it's interesting. Yes, I agree that there are important differences and sometimes they need to be discussed and looked at. But difference does not equal stereotype. And if you're saying things like all boys played PlayStations during COVID and that's why they're falling behind in GCSEs, that's not acceptable. If you're looking at development of boys and learning styles and how they engage differently with academia, that's fine. And that's based on something that could be proved and looked at, and brain development, and particularly how boys maybe develop at a slower rate than girls has been widely kind of researched. But stereotypes that write them all off as lazy essentially is not acceptable. And that's why I think this should be a feminist issue, is because some of these issues that disproportionately affect men are so serious, are so grave. They're 3.9 years likely to die earlier, for example, higher risk of cancer. I've mentioned 3/4 suicides in the UK are men. These are appalling things. If these were happening to another demographic, there'd be a lot more attention around it. And that's why I feel it's an important issue.
So here's a question for you, Sophie, and I don't mean to pose this difficult question to you just to trip you up, but it's one that I actually don't know the answer to, and maybe Edie can weigh in on it as well. I'd love to hear from either one of you on this one. But why, if one of the genders is not cleverer than the other, and these are just stereotypes and false stereotypes, why are there separate chess tournaments for men and women? Yeah, I mean, that's what I want to know is why, we have separate, games in regards to sports, right? It's quite clear that there are differences between men and women in regards to, football or baseball or anything of those kinds of athletics. But if there was no difference in cleverness, for example, wouldn't you think that in things like that, that chess tournaments would be, that would be cross gender, and yet they're separated by gender. Is that is
I
that
do.
something you've ever considered, Sophia? I mean, I hate to kind of throw that out at you because I know you're on friendly territory, but it's just, it's something
Well,
that I was.
I didn't realize that there was such
I
a
think
thing
that's a
Yeah.
as
What do you want to say about it, Sophia?
yeah.
Go ahead.
sorry, I apologize, I couldn't hear
Mm,
that.
yeah.
I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, it may be just down to circumstance. For example, we segregate all our sports, and chess is probably seen within that category, so it's a continuation of something we're used to. Maybe it's something, therefore, we need to challenge and look at and see whether that's a fair division. It may also be, as you're saying, different ways in which men and women approach a game like that, and it's more interesting to match like with like brains, etc. We know there's been lots of research on problem solving between male and female and the way they approach that, and that might extend to issues like chess as well. But what I'm trying to say here is not that we diminish the differences or we pit men and women against each other. I think that is the problem. We don't want to pit men and women against each other in a competitive way. We want to say when one thrives, both thrive. And so when one is falling behind, we need to be looking at that in a particular area. Obviously, completely aware of the fact that in many areas of life, men are advantaged, be that by their biology, be that by the society that they live in, be that by tradition and culture, and sometimes um, things that need to be challenged in patriarchal structures. But where there are falling behind in suicides, that needs to be looked at. We can't just say because men are ahead in some ways or advantaged in some ways, they're all fine. Men are not a homogenous group, and that's what we need to examine.
Sophia, and I in the if you're just tuning in, I'm speaking to Sophia Worringer, and we're talking about her article where she's talked about International Men's Day being a feminist holiday. We're having a discussion right now about the differences between men and women and how they're alike in certain ways, and sort of like the war of the sexes, and how we should be perhaps working together more rather than having a competitive view of things. But there always has been a sort of an inherent competitiveness, and what modern feminism, at least postmodern feminism in the United States, philosophically has set us more in an antagonistic position towards one another, at least from my point of view, Sophia. But I wonder, if you've considered, and I want, knowing that i- liberal in a good way, I'm a libertarian in the United States, which makes me a liberal in the United Kingdom. I wonder how you feel personally about this new controversy about having, biological males in women's sports. Do you have a particular opinion about that? Because I think that sort of blows this whole gender dynamic, this whole discussion about, the war of the sexes wide open. Do you have a particular opinion about, if I was born a biological male competing in women's sports, perhaps taking scholarships away from women, who were born biological women who just can't keep up? What are your thoughts on that?
I think in all these discussions, it's very important to be compassionate because there are real lives involved in all of these issues. But I do think what is important when we're talking about trans issues, when we're talking about equality, when we're talking about all these things, is acknowledging biological difference and social difference between men and women, and therefore acknowledging when there are times where they can compete, when they can't compete, but most of all, safety as a very driving principle here. Okay, so when we're talking about, for example, domestic abuse victims, we know about 2/3 of those in the UK are women, and it's likely to be a male perpetrator, not always the case, but likely to be a male perpetrator. So where there are particular avenues where women are being cared for, survivors of rape, survivors of domestic abuse, you really need to take into consideration their safety. And I think that should be paramount, but also deal with each case with a lot of compassion. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, Sophia makes a good point, Edie, because here in the United States, we've started seeing in mixed martial arts, you've seen, biological males
Yeah,
who have
that's right.
transitioned
Yeah.
and are now competing in women's mixed martial arts, and they're like crushing their skulls, and it's quite
It's
violent, and
it's it's not
is
good.
devastating.
It's not
You
right.
probably didn't expect that this conversation was going to go this way, Sophia,
Yeah.
but I do have to say that you've done a great job in
Yes.
keeping up with it, and you certainly have an interesting point of view. Where can people find out more about your work or follow you online, Sophia?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Sophia Worringer, and I work for the Centre for Social Justice, which also can be found online.
Sophia Worringer, you can see her name posted at the very bottom of the page down there, right underneath her lovely photograph on the screen. So you can follow her on Twitter at Sophia Worringer. Sophia, thank you very much for your time today, and thanks for rolling with the punches as they will. A great article and certainly a great point of view.
Very good.
Yeah,
Very
we
good.
hope to have you back again sometime, Sophia. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.